All right, there we go. What's going on, everybody? Chris Franks with Texas West Capital. We're doing beards and Bitcoin today with those guys that you love. And maybe after last week, one of them maybe you're going to love to hate. But we're not here to make you guys feel good. We're here to give you our thoughts on on the realities of Bitcoin, right? Beyond price, its application in the world, and the way we kind of see things potentially headed. Because again, we are well versed in a lot of the other areas, markets and TradFi and even Bitcoin mining. I know somebody last week thought maybe we don't know anything about Bitcoin. We actually know quite a bit. Tillman, I think, is probably the leader in all that, the guy that you guys maybe wanted to hate last week. But I'm saying all this, you notice, before I bring him on. So that way he can't jump in here at the moment. So he's going to have to wait. But again, you guys, really, at the end of the day, love the interaction last week. And we love the responses we got. And so that kind of leads us into what happened this past week. And that's what we're going to talk about here with Andrew and Tillman. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Awesome.
Really, really good. Yeah. It's a great
Tillman, you still feeling safe over there, man? I don't know if people know where you live, but
Yeah, I feel great. Yeah. Listen, the truth cuts like a two-edged sword.
Well, it's such great timing for this Saylor interview here that they had with Madison Righty or Reddy or whatever her name is there, because after you mentioned that, he then goes on. And I know you were talking about how you and him are like this, and he called you up and, got your thoughts on this before he went and did that. So that probably explains his comments, right?
I have never met him. I have never shared my thoughts with him. He just knows the same playbook I know. And, run the plays that work.
So in other words, we're maybe 2 weeks away from Saylor sort of integrating whole life insurance into his play.
Where with the whole life insurance, right?
I'll guarantee you that Saylor has borrowed against his whole life to buy Bitcoin at some point in his life. I will almost guarantee you that is something he's done.
Oh my gosh! All right. Real quick here, I got a question. Let me answer you real quick. Bernardo, what's going on? Says, I want to join the group. It's very difficult to pay fiat. Can I pay you in crypto? Yeah, man. Make sure you get your name on this list here at this website down below here, texaswestcapital.com/97GC. And then when I send out the links and everything here, it'll probably be really soon here in the next few days. I'll go ahead and work with you about getting a link to pay in crypto, man. So anybody else that wants to pay in crypto as well, we'll make it happen. But anyway, guys, yeah. So what exactly did he say? Well, people did not like his remarks on custody and regulation, right? And so the conversation, as it tells you here, the conversation centered around the risk associated with large institutions holding significant amounts of Bitcoin and the potential for government seizure or confiscation. Which they kind of, said, hey, we had the gold confiscation back there in 1933 and all this kind of stuff. But I think, rightly so, Saylor comes out and says, listen, man, things were different at that time, right? Government needed to confiscate the gold because, it was backing the dollar and, and all this kind of stuff. And, and that's a big difference from Bitcoin today, right? Bitcoin is its own separate thing, right, guys?
Well, I think there is a little confusion even in that. So the government didn't confiscate the gold from the banks.
Yeah. Right.
Confiscated the gold from the people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is the playbook. So here's the problem. People want to look at Bitcoin without looking at the real value of money. So you want to call Bitcoin money? Great. Then you better be subject to the entire definition of what money entails. Money is not just about spending. Money is about control. And so when you print a US dollar and you run that US dollar through a bank to wherever its destination is, you have absolute control. When you have Bitcoin going peer-to-peer from cold storage wallet XYZ to cold storage wallet PDQ, you have zero control. So when you look at, it doesn't take a genius to look at all of the talking points of all of the opposing political people against Bitcoin. What do they attack? Self-sovereign custody. That is what they attack. And so the middle ground, Andrew says this phrase all the time, and I've adopted it as a phrase that I use, which is, in any circumstance, reality lies typically in the middle.
Yeah.
One side of the voice is saying it's going to be doom and gloom. One side saying it's going to be great. It's typically kind of in the middle. And negotiations are supposed to be that way. And so look at politically what's going to be negotiated based upon the fact that we all know that Bitcoin is now being woven into the fabric of our financial system. Ask yourself the question, which pieces of Bitcoin is being woven into the fabric of our system? Is it the self-sovereign custody, go spend your Bitcoin on coffee portion of it? Or is it the, holy cow, there's only 21 million of these, and that base denominator against an inflationary fiat, we have to control?
Yeah.
No different than silver, no different than gold. You cannot have, if you're controlling the printing of the dollars, you have to also control the commodities by which the value of that dollar is being judged. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what's next for Bitcoin is the government's going to control it. Why don't we want that, considering they're the masterminds that have all made our lives super rich and easy compared to every other country I've been in? And, that capitalism, either you believe in it or you don't, either you participate in it or you don't. But the free markets here have spoken. People want Bitcoin. The government's job is now to say, how do we give it to them? And I think Larry Fink has made a pretty good case for the fact that they're a good custodian of Bitcoin and that they can be the proper control mechanisms to the market that make it money.
See, you got to go out. You got to go out this week, and you just got to keep building on the hate you built last week.
I'm not telling you things that I want to happen. I'm telling you things that are going to happen. There's a big difference. In an altruistic utopia, we would all be trading fruits for nuts and everybody would find value in everyone's creation. That's not the way the world works. The world works off this thing called fiat. And guess what? Whoever has the printing press to the fiat gets to make the rules. That's the way the world works.
Yeah, and so I think no, I actually agree. Because for quite a bit of my younger life, I was very anarchist. I was a big reader of all the all that great stuff, which still today makes a lot of sense, but it really is not applicable in the way that the world works today, and that's the issue, right? So we can go there and go, well, we would love for things to work this way, Rothbard and others like that. But then you get to go, okay, but it doesn't work with the way the world is today. So we have to be more realistic.
You're throwing out 1,000 babies with the bathwater. It's not like our system. It's like somebody used to say this to me a long time ago. They'd say, our system isn't perfect, but it's the best system out there. And so the question is what can we glean from Bitcoin, from its altruistic, the things that we fell in love with about it? What can we glean from that and use as a new marker against the traditional systems? And that's value, right? But to say that one's going to replace the other is very foolish in my estimation. And listen, I believed it at one point because I was young and in Bitcoin, and I thought, man, this has such disruptive qualities to it. It's like, holy cow, there's nothing that can compete with it. So it's going to be the fastest horse on the track. And so it's going to win the race. Well, not when the other 8 horses are in collusion to make you lose.
Yeah.
Think about it. I'm in a horse race. I got the fastest horse. That should make me win the race, shouldn't it? No, it shouldn't. Because if I own the other 8, if somebody else owns the other 8 horses and they all get together and go, there's one objective here, guys, that horse doesn't win the race. What are the odds of that horse winning the race? None. It'll be taken out by force, by corral, whatever means necessary. So the control on the track is what is being protected. And the control on the track is saying, hey, great, you want to run armadillos around the track? We don't like armadillos, but evidently you guys do. But you're going to play by the same rules that the horse races play by. And here are the rules. And, if we want to be included in the track, then we play by the rules.
Play by the rules, yeah.
Yeah. And if you measure what our track looks like now compared to the track that we're about to get let in the race on, you'd be a fool to not want to be on this track. It's Larry Fink's track that we're on.
Well, that's kind of the point, is that this isn't necessarily a Bitcoin versus the United States government argument, because from a financial and monetary standpoint, Larry Fink is, the boss of the folks that handle things at the Federal Reserve. I mean, he really sets policy, right, based on the moves that he makes. So from that sense, we still have a lot of runway ahead of us for Bitcoin to be as Bitcoin is today. But again, to not see the forest for the trees, so to speak, with this argument would be foolish. And here's why: because the forest that is growing up around Bitcoin is leverage, is exotic,
Derivatives,
levered products and derivatives, options, lending, all of that stuff will happen in and around Bitcoin, and it will happen in a way that's faster than it happened with other commodities and the like.
But again, you're going to have your choice. They're not going to switch protocols. To Andrew's point, but Bitcoin is Bitcoin right now, but they're going to make it so attractive to you that eventually all the Bitcoin are going to be held by the banks. That's the way it's, unless it's like these rare, and that is where the separation of price will be recognized.
Well, if you have any understanding of history and financial markets, right? So back in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, how did you hold shares in a stock? It wasn't custodied by a bank. You held pieces of paper that said how many shares of stock that you owned.
Yep.
That's how the system worked, right?
Preach.
That is no longer how the system works. There are no, you don't, you're holding it theoretically, so maybe you can put it in a
why
frame.
Why is that, Andrew? Because they don't trust us with the collateral. That's right. The period. That's the end of it right there. If I'm lending you money, right, and I'm lending it against, pick your asset, Bitcoin, your house, a watch, your car, any lendable object that has a normal value and market to it, right? If I'm lending that to you, who gets to hold that asset? Well, depends. If I'm lending you money for a car loan, I'm letting you hold the asset, and there's a different level of risk to that, and there's a different rate to that. Versus if you come to me and go, hey, I got this classic Cadillac. It's worth a bloody fortune. Came from Jay Leno's garage. And I go, oh, okay, you want to borrow money against it? Great. Leave it with me. I'll give you 90% of the value of that car. So you get a lower rate and you get a lot more money. Yeah. That is capitalism, and that wins. That is a mathematical equation that is like moths to a flame. People want yield. People want money, and those mechanisms allow people who hold Bitcoin to generate money without giving up their Bitcoin. But they are giving up one thing: who's custodying the Bitcoin? And some people will resist that, but I'm here to tell you that the benefits that come along with that far outweigh the hypothetical worst case scenario that essentially the government doesn't want you to have your Bitcoin anymore.
So you probably saw it, Chris. Scott and I had a conversation with Jeff Park at Bitwise.
I was going to bring that up. It was a great show. Hey, real quick here before he gets in this, guys, if you didn't see it, it was what, yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Scott Melker, Wolf of All Streets, amazing morning show. Andrew was on there with Jeff Park, head of Alpha Strategies at Bitwise, discussing options, guys. It was absolutely, you need to watch. It was a great show.
Yeah, so he comes from, traditional finance. He was a Morgan Stanley guy in their exotic derivatives department.
White glove.
So let's deconstruct what's exotic derivatives, right? So his point is that of a particular asset, say, Apple stock or Tesla stock or an actual home mortgage, the scale of that market is X. The derivatives associated with that market is 10 to 50x in terms of actual value of that individual asset. Eventually, that will come to Bitcoin. And what does that mean? That means that instead of just pushing buy on Apple or Tesla stock, ultra high net worth individuals want some exposure to it, but they want some level of reduced volatility, right? So they'll create an exotic derivative that is a version of options and the actual asset. There's upside and there's some downside, right? The downside is much more limited, and they're paying a premium for this product so that they can get a 14% basically guaranteed yield unless something goes absolutely haywire. So there's 14% upside with a maturity date, okay? And there's some level of downside if things get really, really, really bad. There is a world coming where that's how people will want access to Bitcoin as an asset. They won't necessarily believe in the ethos and the philosophy of self-custody. What they will believe in is return, right?
But what you just described to lay people, that it's like this. We're at a level of building that allows you to go up to 5 stories. This is a crane that allows you to go up to 80 stories. Right. It's a orders of magnitude of difference. And when he's talking about like one market can bear so much activity and liquidity, but the derivatives can far exceed that. Think about it like a casino floor. How many people can you fit around a craps table and actually bet on the dice that are being rolled?
Yeah.
10, 15. If you cram it in too deep, 20 people. Yeah. The rest of the people, if you want to get more action at that table, they're not betting on the table because they can't see it. It's the market's gotten too big for the bang for the buck, for the liquidity. So they look for a smaller market. So what does a smaller market provide them? A smaller market provides them more power in the market with a smaller amount of capital. And it allows them to play what Andrew calls derivatives. It's like this. Now, I'm on the 3rd row of that casino table, and I can't see the table. So what I start doing is I start looking at the first row of people and who's collecting chips. Oh, seat 1 and 3 have been on a hot streak. They're rolling. And what I do is I look at the guy next to me and I go, oh, you can't see the table either, huh? I'll bet you that 1 and 3 win this next hand. And he goes, yeah, I'll bet you that. And we start betting on the table action, but it's off-table bets. Yeah. And imagine the entire casino floor filling up with people that are making bets on what happens on that table. But it's off-table bets. How much money is in the crowd versus at the table? And who actually makes the rules of the table at that point? Who's the casino going to listen to? The 20 people at the table going, we'd like the free cigar with our bets. Or are they going to listen to the crowd of people that control the entire floor of the casino that are betting derivatives on those, saying, you know what? We need some perks around here. Can you get some some cigars passed out? Who gets that cigar quicker? The person who controls the outside money. And there are firms and people that specialize, like Andrew had on his show with Scott the other day, that have played at the highest levels of this game, and their whole job is to draw liquidity onto the casino floor that's off
In
table.
short term, for our listeners who want to buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin and hope it goes up, this is go up type of activity, right? This is enormous amounts of liquidity that are coming into an asset that is a fixed asset. That was another part of the conversation, is a fixed asset, right? So Jeff described a Vanna gamma squeeze where you have a fixed asset. You have shorts that are forced to buy more as the price goes up very, very quickly, and it also trades 24/7. So you have GameStop like price activity, but you don't have the ability to quote unquote issue more shares and issue more Bitcoin, and what could happen there in terms of a gamma squeeze that pushes the price dramatically higher very, very quickly. The other thing that we talked about that a lot of people have forgot, if you're not a close market watcher, there in his argument, people came back to him and said, well, that kind of a gamma squeeze has never happened with a commodity. And I reminded him, and I reminded all the listeners, I'm like, well, yes, it has. Anybody remember when oil traded at negative $30 for like half of a day?
Yeah.
Like, so options and options
Yeah,
activity.
but I can peel back the onion on why that happened. Because there was more surface oil than storage. So there was a real reason for that
Sure.
drove that. Because if I've got a bunch of oil and I don't have a place to put it and no one's buying it, that oil becomes a liability because I can't just dump it into the ocean. It's an environmental. So
But the point is that there are traders and there are levers and pulleys that those traders will use to profit from that problem.
100%. Well, and actually know that the shortage is coming,
right,
and try to help it along.
Yeah. Right.
Position yourself accordingly. Yeah, exactly. And so what y'all need to be paying attention here. I know, like when we say that, we start talking about these things, and it goes against the base ethos of what Bitcoin, supposedly created for, and all this kind of stuff. But it isn't because of us.
Right.
This isn't even because of government or Larry Fink. Okay, guys, listen. This is because of you or those like you, right? Listen. Generally speaking, human beings are, I'm going to say the word, it's lazy, right? We don't want to have to exert effort to be our own banks. We don't want to have to exert effort to be our own security. So government comes in and says, hey, I'm going to wiggle a little bit of something here in front of you, encourage you to do this thing where you're giving up control. You're giving up a certain bit of control, a certain bit of autonomy here so that we can do this thing supposedly. And that's the same thing that's going on here with Bitcoin, and moving to institutional versus, personal holding on of the Bitcoin. I can't think of the word I'm trying to use here. Right. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Is it because they're being forced to do it? Is people are doing it?
Well, it's nature forces us to do it, actually, Chris. Like, I want you to think about my analogy a couple of weeks ago where I said, who owns if I own a piece of land and I'm next to a river, do I own the water as it's flowing by my land?
Right.
No, I don't. But does it provide me a huge economic value? Yes, it does. If I own a lake on my land, does it have the same earning potential that a river does? No, it doesn't. It can't bring goods to me. It can't make a harbor. It can't do the things that commerce requires. And that's why they call it liquidity. And so what we're doing with Bitcoin is we're completing a liquidity loop that's required for systems to work, for incentives to be there, for money to flow. Money does nothing sitting in a vault. Nothing.
Yeah.
Money doesn't do. If you own a bunch of gold bars and you sit it in the vault, does it have any earning potential at all? No.
Right.
But if I take that gold and I put it in a bunch of semiconductors that, it's gold isn't the primary thing. I'm not selling gold when I sell a computer, but is gold in a computer? Yes, it is. So which market needs to be bigger, the computer market or the gold market? You tell me. Which objective becomes primary at that point? And so the question becomes is, what do we want Bitcoin's primary objective to be? If we want it to be a store of value, this comes with that. Derivatives and everything that we're talking about, at some point, those derivatives may be representing one sat the price of Bitcoin has gotten so high. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's a good thing. That's a great problem to have. That would be, we've arrived. One sat is now being traded. I mean, it's, it's nothing. So
yeah. And FiboSwanny, I think he's going to have a meltdown over here. I love Fibo, man. I love Fibo. He's with us over at TWC. But very much on the strong, this is what Bitcoin was created for purpose, white paper, screw y'all. And you're bringing it into the bigger world thing. And, and there's a lot of that, right? There is a lot of that within the Bitcoin community, especially for those who have been in, prior to now, I would say, right? Prior to now. Because here's the thing that I've talked about, in the past, which is this fact that people that are coming into Bitcoin now versus those of us, y'all, me, Fibo, those of us that have been in for years, right? Those coming in now are not going to have, for the most part, aren't going to have the same desire, dare I say, for self-custody. And so when you look at, okay, if government, if institutionals, or if government, wants to push it toward, getting rid of self-custody, getting into institutional custody, right? Getting into bank custody. I mean, it becomes easier because, again, you come in, you got the people that are coming in late, which is most of the people, and they're incentivized, like you said, you get loan products, you can get greater loan rates, interest rates on it. You can get a greater loan amount of money as a loan from it, if the bank is holding it. And so for people, like this goes back to what we're talking about, people follow incentives, and most people don't want to deal with the strictness of being their own bank, of being their own security, of doing all this. And so you incentivize them a bit to get them to kind of give that up.
But what are you incentivizing them to do? You're incentivizing them to move money. The movement of money makes money in our system. It's like a hydroelectric dam. You don't make energy with water by it sitting there. You have to let it flow. And the faster it flows, the more electricity you make. The faster money flows, the velocity of money is how our world works. And so Bitcoin is now getting to contribute to that cause. But for us to think that Bitcoin's cause is greater than that cause is good luck on that one. By definition, you're the minority and always will be. Why? Because you've limited your supply to 21 million. If you limit your supply to 21 million, you have no inflationary, function. So if you want to grow at a steady clip, other than demand, inflation is the way you do that. If a government needs to buy weaponry for their sovereign, needs, like for their defense, do you think that they're gonna, be subject to not borrowing that money? You think they're gonna be like, no, we're gonna self-custody. We can't let go of this Bitcoin. This is our sovereignty. No, there's bigger priorities than holding your Bitcoin, which is defense. And so what would they want? They would want, oh, well, in the perfect world, we wouldn't want to sell our Bitcoin if they held it, but we'd like to borrow against it so we can buy these guns that we need for this battle we're fighting. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's functionality to the lending system that provides everyone their cake and eat it too. And to let's say you are a self-sovereign, believer, and you haven't come around to this yet. Let's say something catastrophic happens in your life, and God forbid it does. You don't want that. But take 1 million people, certain portion of them, they're going to have the worst of the worst circumstances that they fall prey to. Do you want a world where you cannot borrow against your Bitcoin and keep it? Or do you want a world where in that event you have to sell it because there's no functionality that gives you the alternative?
Yeah, it's Bitcoin maxis and sovereignty and all that stuff and self custody. Listen, I've said on my Twitter page, buy Bitcoin in self custody, maybe 1,000 times over the
At
past 2
least.
years, right? But then there also is a reality of the world that we live in. For example, just yesterday, Bernstein came out with one of their. They have a black book that they publish on specific topics a couple times a year, that are important topics that they deem really important. It's actually a Bitcoin black book. It's 160 pages about Bitcoin from Bernstein, which is one of the top 3 research firms across the globe. They claim in the book, the TLDR is that Bitcoin is going to go to 200K by the end of 2025.
It was 250K, wasn't it?
It's 200K by 2025.
Okay.
I'm reading it right here.
Oh, okay.
And on top of that, the first point that they make, literally the first sentence of the book is 10 global asset managers now own more than 60 billion of Bitcoin wrapped as regulated ETFs, compared with 12 billion in September of 2022. By 2024, by the end of 2024, we expect Wall Street to replace Satoshi as the top Bitcoin wallet. So, there's what we hope for, and then there's reality. Like you can't you can't slow down reality. The best idea for those folks out there is not to turn into get off my lawn Bitcoin holders, right? It's how do I most benefit from the shifts and changes associated with Bitcoin? How can I benefit from the moves made by large institutions and governments who probably aren't as sharp as I can be with having years and years and years of Bitcoin knowledge?
That's very wise counsel. And it goes to one of the things Chris has said on his Twitter account a lot, which is some people would prefer to be right than make money. And you have to ask yourself, which camp are you? And if you're digging your heels in on the Bitcoin thing, there's nothing wrong with self-custody. I would, like I said on the last week's call to try to, calm everybody's nerves, was, just do it until they tell you can't. But at that point, you really should look in the mirror very deeply and say, is this a good decision? And maybe you want to hold on to a few sats in self-custody as a memento to your journey, but you definitely want your wealth on a highway that has an off ramp, I promise. And you should look at it like Andrew said, as a means to better your life. There's nothing, you can't take the Bitcoin with you. We're all going to the same place, right? And so the question is what what tools do we have to make our ride to that place, better? And what tools do we have to make other people's life better on the way to that place? And so Bitcoin has tremendous power. I mean, this is like an engine that's never been harnessed before, that the biggest brains on the planet have decided to harness. I mean, that should be.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not a Saylor fan. By the way, there are other reasons why I'm not a Saylor fan. The guy's in his mid to late 40s and he's single and he has no kids. There's a couple red flags right there. So his thought processes and how he sees the world are not in line with how I see the world, and how I choose to go about building wealth. It's not even about building wealth. That is a misnomer in my mind. I go about building protection and opportunity for those that are closest to me. That's what I want to get done. And Saylor doesn't have to be interested in doing that. He's like, well, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I don't have anybody to be accountable to other than myself. And I'm just going to give away my Bitcoin or just let it do whatever it does.
Well, he's a statistical anomaly, across the board. And if you look at the risks that he's taken to get there, he's the guy who got in the F1 Formula One racing car and went around the track as fast as the car could go and didn't wreck.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you get a lot of credit. And he put the fastest time on the board, and you can say that was too much risk for me, and we all get to make that determination. Like I'm with you. I don't want to drive around the track at Mach speed to do that. And it's mainly because I do have kids. I'm living
Right.
for different reasons than I
Right.
used to live for,
Yeah.
right? But Bitcoin, I want everybody to think about this. This could happen 25 years from now. You won't care. Bitcoin's price, all the things we love about Bitcoin, they love about it too. That's why they're letting it in the club. So
Mm-hmm.
they want to protect that narrative as much as we do, if not more at this point. And them accumulating it becoming bankable, all those things, if we talked about it 3 years ago, everyone would say, sign on the dotted line. This is what our destiny is. And now that we're here, it's kind of like, well, he left the toilet seat up. Yeah, but he's a great husband. You probably could think about some other things than leaving the toilet. Like, focus on the positives and not just the negatives that you were, quote, losing out on. Because yes, self-sovereignty will be looked at as a negative thing going forward, and it's going to get more increasingly so the further we
Yeah.
get from today.
Again, some more history with markets, right? So banks were giving home loans to individuals and depositors for 100 years, and then in the mid to late 80s, Solomon Brothers began the practice of, well, maybe we should package some of these mortgages we have on our balance sheet and turn them into kind of a product, right? And so you're looking at 50, 60 years worth of mortgages just being mortgages and acting the way mortgages have, as we see them. Same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's just going to be Bitcoin for a much longer time here, but there is a world, and the Solomon Brothers process will at some point happen. And because we live in a society that is, on steroids with technology, that process will happen faster than a 50-year period.
Much
But at the
faster.
same time, we're still a ways away from this. But again, the architecture, there's folks with hammer and
Listen,
nail building the architecture as we
you
speak.
can die on this hill too if you want to.
Yeah, yeah, you
And
can.
there are plenty of talks out there that I know of that people have said, we're going to create a Bitcoin city. Everything's going to be Bitcoin. You can't buy anything without Bitcoin. And we're going to attract, and we're going to show the world that we can do it with Bitcoin better than they can do it. Well, if how long would that take? Let's just say they're right for a second. Let's say you could create the Bitcoin city that was the utopia. And let's say that played itself out. How long would it have to play out before they had more guns than we have? A long time.
Yeah.
And so that ship isn't going to turn quickly at all. But I will tell you that Bitcoin is something that every country will hold on their balance sheet because Larry Fink wants them to. And that's what we should focus on. Now, question is, if you're if you're Larry Fink in the United States, and you're kind of taking note of all these countries that are starting to buy Bitcoin, and you're looking at all the ones that are buying Bitcoin that you don't like, that don't like you, and you're going, man, self-custody probably is a bigger issue than me and you and Chris on this call with our stupid little pennies and our cold storage. But self-custody becomes a really big deal when two bad acting countries are trading weapons and buying it in Bitcoin. And guess what? If Bitcoin's price gets to a place, and just by the laws and nature of Bitcoin's self-sovereignty and the network that's there, that absolutely will take place. And so how do you get ahead of it? Well, you control the markets by which you can hold and own Bitcoin. And that's just, again, it's going to take a long time, but Bitcoin's become that powerful. We should be celebrating. It's something that's now being recognized
Yeah,
on the world
my
stage.
guess is that if Bitcoin gets to 200 by the end of next year, and then in 3 years, 36 months from now, it's closer to 500,000. My guess is that a sizable portion of folks that consider themselves maxis and I'll never give up self-custody are going to be turning that Bitcoin into stuff. Okay. That's just human nature, man.
It's hard when you've got access to that, right? It becomes literally life-changing, not just for you, but for your kids, probably your grandkids. If you've been a maxi for years now and you've been steadily collecting Bitcoin, I mean, the reality of it is for most people, and this is a significant, most people have a price.
Yeah,
I don't believe that necessarily everyone has a price, but you'd be hard pressed to find that most people don't.
In my estimation, that is an education that's a little bit of a process. People who don't have money working for them don't think like that. But when you come into that much money and you sit down with an advisor and they go, well, what are your living expenses? What do you need to pay your bills and feel comfortable? And you go, well, I'd love to have, $500,000, 50K a month would be great. And they go, well, sir, you have 20 million in cash. You're going to be earning about 1.5 million a year in just interest. And that's like a tilt, and most people don't understand that when you get to a certain level of wealth, you can do nothing and make more money than you want to spend. And when Andrew said 250 is the number, whatever that number is, there's an equation that should be going on in everyone's mind, because Bitcoin, you can't eat Bitcoin. You can't set up a trust that guarantees that your grandkids go to college with Bitcoin. All of those things you can't secure now unless you sell. And so there are things, like Chris said, that I think will drive people to liquidate their Bitcoin, and that's going to happen the higher the price goes over the next 50 years, 100 years, whatever it is. And guess what that's going to naturally do? It's going to draw all of the concentration of the cold storage Bitcoin into the hands of the banks and the investment bankers. That's where it's all going.
Well, we got. Oh, I was just going to say real quick here. We've got a question here. If you guys want to jump on this, asking what your thoughts are here. Could a renaissance in local banking happen if banks are able to custody? Wouldn't you be incentivized to have a local credit union hold your Bitcoin? This way, your community benefits. Or will only the major banks be allowed to custody, in y'all's opinion?
I personally think it will be every FDIC insured bank. They want the funnel and the net. It's like shrimping. You just drop your nets, and the bigger the nets you have, and the more horsepower in your motor, the more shrimp you catch. And they want it as big and wide as possible.
Yeah, over the next 2 years, it's just going to be the biggest banks, but it will evolve in the following 2 years to be every bank that wants to do it. There is a there's the lending portion of this, and this is really where Saylor is going with all of this, because he wants to be the first and biggest quote unquote Bitcoin bank. I mean, that's what he wants to do.
Don't tell all of the secrets. I don't think most people know that, Andrew.
Yeah,
that's a good dish right there.
So the fact of the matter is that being able to lend and take your Bitcoin and turn it into something without giving up quote unquote control of it or selling it, that is effectively the next turn in Bitcoin's story, because right now all you're faced with, unless you want to do some really super exotic things in unregulated exchanges and the like, and 18 months removed from huge blowups where you were effectively loaning your Bitcoin for a return. The only way that you can produce dollars and produce spendable currency is to lend it to an entity.
Well, and you're doing it already. It's hypocritical, and we all have done it. If you've participated in a DEX, you have lent your Bitcoin out to a liquidity pool, and
Yeah.
giving someone a yield for that functionality, that you've already done it. A DEX is nothing more than a bank that takes a yield for the liquidity that it provides in its exchange functionality. So
Yeah. And the only way that you avoid that risk, by the way, currently is to sell your Bitcoin, right? So if you don't want to sell, right? If you don't want to sell, there's very few ways to use your Bitcoin as to purchase things. Even though there's a lot more than there were, let's call it 5 years ago, there's still a fairly limited pool of things that you can use Bitcoin for. So if you want to create layers of usability with Bitcoin, it's going to have to come on the lending and leverage side with regulated entities, and they know that, by the way. They know that, and they want to do it, right? Because Bernstein doesn't put out a one of their black books that's 160 pages long, okay, without there being a reason for that, without there being a reason for them to make money on it. How does Bernstein make money? Bernstein makes money by charging the likes of JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley or a family office hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for access to their research. Okay. Yeah. Well, so why are they doing this one? They want to be at the cutting edge of research, and they want people to keep paying for their research. That's why. Well, and the only reason people are paying for it is if they want it, because they're going to be using and buying or custodying or something with Bitcoin way more than they were.
Well, and you ask yourself, do you think that company knows its audience? Yeah, I think they probably do. I think they probably are
I hope so, right?
Target with what they want. And I'll give you a fun little exercise that we can think about here for people. This is the difference between fiat and Bitcoin. Bitcoin yields fiat if we play this game. What does that mean? Well, it means when you go to buy a car, let's say right now I go to buy a car and I want to lease it, right? The company's taking the value of the car, sales price, and the term that I'm holding it, and the depreciation that is going to incur over that term, and they're dividing it up in monthly costs to me, and I'm paying monthly for the depreciation of the use of that car, right? And every month I have to come up with whatever the payment is, $450. If I was holding Bitcoin and I went to that same car dealership and I said, listen, car dealership, I want to buy this car, but I'm not going to give you a monthly payment. I'm going to let you hold my Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin yields 7.5%, and I'm letting you hold 100 grand, you're making $7,500 a year on my Bitcoin. Yeah. That covers the cost of my payment and then some. So I'm getting a nicer car. And at the end of the term, those are still my Bitcoin, and I'm taking them back. And we're going to all do that through a dual signature wallet and a third-party self-custodian called a bank that's going to hold the Bitcoin. And we're going to have a piece of paper between us that says the rules. If essentially who gets the Bitcoin at the end of the term, what do you want? You want to be paying fiat and interest to the banks the rest of your life, or do you want to turn yourself into the bank and lend out an asset that produces yield that allows you to extract value from that in the form of goods and services? Like, that is the future. And I'd much rather let somebody hold my Bitcoin for a few years while I get to own a car for free than have to be forced to sell my Bitcoin because I need transportation and I don't have cash.
Listen, at the core of Saylor's commentary right now and his evolution over the past 6 months is a very, very, very simple concept, and something that we all sort of grapple with in our own minds. He's got a huge amount of Bitcoin, and at some point he's asking himself, what am I going to do with all this Bitcoin?
How do I sell without crashing the market?
What am I going to do with all this Bitcoin? Right? So we're seeing, in whether it's interviews or statements from him, he's answering that question in his own mind. What am I going to do with all this Bitcoin? And I guarantee you that what am I going to do with all this Bitcoin? It's not just him sitting in a room in his house trying to answer this question and writing on a funny looking piece of paper and then tweeting about it. That's not what's going on. He's talking to massive institutions, massive banks, global players on the financial chessboard, and having these conversations because they want to talk to him because he's got a huge amount of
he
assets.
predicted what was going to happen with MicroStrategy's stock, and I think that proved to him that the entire bank, like he could create a bank out of Bitcoin essentially, because what he's done between the share price of MicroStrategy and its leverage capabilities, right? What is he doing in MicroStrategies? He's borrowing money to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What is that? That's a bank.
For the sake of my own enjoyment in just the way that I look at comedy, I do hope that his bank offers whole life insurance in the future, so that we can hearken back to these conversations. Bitcoin whole life insurance. Boy, would that be awesome!
Well,
Right?
it won't be called that, but I bet you $10 to $1 that Bitcoin's yield will be attached to a product that's a retirement function product at some point. So that will be replicated for sure.
Yeah, we had another question here. Looks like Skiing Rooster. I love the name there. He says, I wonder how many people will go for loans backed by Bitcoin. He says, I'd like to have the option to have Bitcoin on a hardware wallet and be able to have a loan on that. And I think at the end of the day, I think
they don't trust you. They don't trust you. No, they don't like you and they don't trust you. And when they write that piece of paper that dictate the loan, they're going to require you to hand over the Bitcoin. Now you're going to have a fuzzy, warm feeling because you're getting a piece of paper and a Ferrari, but you won't have your cold storage wallet anymore.
Now that market can and will exist. It'll effectively be a black market, right? You'll be making deals with individuals, right? And there will be individuals that will, proffer in that type of activity.
Well, and that's when the price will separate from the other price. And that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of you can die on this mountain if you want to. You can move to one of those Bitcoin cities where they only take Bitcoin and you can change your life to where you don't ever use fiat again. But I think you're going to lose. That's my opinion. Why? Well, because it's easier to turn on a printing press and tell everybody this is money than it is to create a new Bitcoin.
Yeah. And again, just for everybody here, I mean, we're talking about half a decade to a decade out, right? That these, the institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and all of, by the way, the authorized participants associated with the Bitcoin ETFs, which is JP Morgan, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, every big bank on the planet. They want a period of skyrocketing returns for Bitcoin inside the Bitcoin ETFs. That's how they're going to make money in a big way, short and medium term. Now, once they get to a part where they're like, all right, what else can we do with this? That's when you're going to find significant adjustments to the architecture. And, the ethos will make it.
I don't even think it's as orchestrated in most cases as that. I think what you described earlier and what we talked about the casino floor, it's just a natural process of more money being bet on the side bets than at the table bets. And as that happens, it's like a rising tide. One becomes a lot heavier than the other and it has more weight and more people are participating, more money's in it.
Another reason why options are such a big deal for the Bitcoin ETFs, because people will see headlines in finance and they'll just kind of skim over them. And those headlines are often dumbed down to the least common denominator. But if you peel a couple layers back, remember when Roaring Kitty came back about 6 to 9 months ago and did some GameStop stuff? Roaring Kitty didn't come back and put out some tweets and just spot buy GameStop stock. It was all options related, all of it. All of his moves were options moves, right? And he made a huge amounts of money. And options were the thing that moved the market again for GameStop. Options are incredibly powerful tools.
Well, why? Because they're
if they get
highly
out of whack,
borrowed.
yeah, if they get out of whack on the long short side, that's when price gets explosive.
Well, because it's a highly leveraged thing. Even the very definition of an option is that you're taking a very small amount of money and securing a very large position. So if you're taking a massive side bet on something, you're putting a small amount of money, but if you're right, the casino has to pay out a large amount. So if there's in the markets, there's no casino, there's no house. So if there isn't enough people to make it right, that's when you get the squeezes, both short and long. And I do think that is coming for Bitcoin. I think you're spot on about that. I think that there will be an event, but I think the volatility of that event and the very nature of those types of events are meant to shake the fruit from the tree. They've got to have this. They've got to get as many Bitcoin into the banks and into the investment bankers' hands, period, the end. And how does that happen? With massive fear and massive greed. And that's the one part of this puzzle that I'm really scratching my head about, because how do you achieve that and at the same time control, keep price control where people have confidence in the long-term store value piece? And we've seen the price fluctuations in previous cycles just go crazy, and we've kind of noticed since the ETFs have been out, they haven't gone as crazy. But one would have to think mathematically that they're going to have to go crazy again, because that's the only thing that gets the Bitcoin to move, right? We have to have the water move. We have to have current. So if we are going to get the current, we have to provide incentive for that current. It has to be in the form of yield. So here's an interesting hypothesis. Will a price of $1 million per Bitcoin cause more Bitcoin to come out of the closet into public circulation? Or will banks lending 90% loan to value ratio with no personal guarantee get more Bitcoin out of the closet? And that's the question. And I'd have to say, I'd think that the latter would provide more liquidity. And so I think that's what's going to happen faster than big price spikes. But I don't know. That's me.
Well, no, I mean, it's good stuff to be thinking about, right? Because I honestly believe a lot of what we talk about here, most people aren't considering. Either they don't know because they don't have, maybe the backgrounds that we do, but also maybe that they just kind of willfully ignore, right? I mean, we tend to do that on things that we really like, right? Certain beliefs we have, we tend to willfully ignore the other side of that, right? The other possibilities. But real quick here, Saylor just put a tweet out here. Let me see, it was Will Cleanscales. Let us know about this. But he said, hey, I support self-custody for those willing and able, the right to self-custody for all, and freedom to choose the form of custody and custodian for individuals and institutions globally. Bitcoin benefits from all forms of investment by all types of entities and should welcome everyone. So,
I love how that's an answer that has no answer to it. That's like, yes, I completely support if you guys want to die on this mountain, but it doesn't say that the alternative isn't going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, hey, listen, guys, I'm not saying I don't think that you should be able to do this. Go ahead, do what you want, but I still stand by what I said otherwise.
Exactly.
So I said you said your last name. I said your name right there, Will. The way he got excited about that, I think maybe people don't necessarily say his name correctly. So I'm glad I did, buddy. Thank you for letting us know about the tweet there, man. But man. So yeah, again, guys, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, at least up through a certain bit of time in the past, have gotten into Bitcoin precisely because of the original white paper, because of the ethos behind it. But I'm not saying you can't, like Tillman said, we all have to pick our hill to stand on, right? Our hill to die on, in life, in all the different areas of life. And, if you choose that, hey, listen, more power to you. we just kind of put it out there going, well, listen, historically, as we tried to lay out today, the world doesn't really work like that.
No.
Maybe it happens and okay, then it's great. But the odds are, again, the way we approach the markets, all three of us, is that we kind of do the things that tend to happen versus always trying to look at that other far-flung case, when it comes to price action and what's going on there. And even these guys, at Arch Public, these two gentlemen here that have been so eloquent with their discussion today, even with their algorithms, again, it's not like, hey, listen, we're going to code these things to take these outlandish, but maybe it might work. We're gonna code these things to go to kind of look at what's most likely to work, what's most likely to happen. And that's the way we're approaching this here with y'all, and talking about what we know about these other areas and what we know about the financial system and how things historically tend to go. And the goal there is, hey, listen, you can choose to agree with it or do more research on it or not. We would encourage you to do more research on it. That's the ideal, right? It's to get these things out there in the open and to be talked about, because at the end of the day, we all are very big proponents of Bitcoin. The three of us, all of y'all probably out there listening in, same thing. But we don't want y'all to be so narrow focused that you miss, what's at this point more likely to happen than not.
Well,
and
things change is the truth. The network's already changed. Chris, was it profitable to mine Bitcoin on a PC 10 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was. Is it profitable now? No. You can't.
It's a hell-mo, I believe, today.
Yeah. So the whole environment, that there's nothing static here. And we've been adopted into a really, really dynamic club, like a club that likes it to be as dynamic as possible. They want 100 derivative products. Why? Because they just want the spread. They're just playing the clip. They're playing arbitrage. And so what do you want when you're playing arbitrage? You want as much liquidity flowing through the arbitrage play as possible. That's the only limiting factor to arbitrage. If I can go to a garage sale and I know that somebody has a Charizard whatever that's $1 million Pokemon card, and they don't know what they have, and I know what they have, and I can go there and I can buy it for $10. Well, I've played arbitrage on that Pokemon card of $995,950. Well, guess what? Those circumstances don't happen very often. That's what you call a holy grail arbitrage. Most arbitrages, so if you're Goldman Sachs, how many Pokemons can you search for, and how much money can you shell out at $10 a piece and place that cash? There's not enough Charizards out there. So what do they want? They want something that's just simple and tight, with lots of buyers and lots of sellers and lots of different reasons for buying and selling and lots of different schemes of layering derivatives on top of your holdings. Like, they want it as complicated as possible, because beauty is seen in the eye of the beholder. And me, as an investor, may see the beauty in playing options in Bitcoin and the ETFs and trying to figure out a mechanism that gives me an advantage there. Whereas you guys could be playing something totally different. And they're just looking at how much money is this attracting.
Yeah.
Well, they've seen an unbelievable response, the biggest in the history of ETFs. So I would just tell you, and the only thing I would disagree with Andrew on about what he said was maybe the timeline. I think this is going to be a very accelerated timeline. I would be shocked if they aren't moving as fast as they can move to make this as.
Andrew, did you quiet him there, Andrew? Did you put him on mute?
You know what? Mentally, I muted him. That's correct. Yeah, mentally, I muted him.
I'm just getting another call. You weren't listening. Yeah, they're going to make this market as big as they can make it, as quick as they can make it, is the point.
Well, that's all right. You got your disagreeing with Andrew there. Andrew disagrees with your idea about whole life. So
no, I don't. No, I don't. I just think it's the most boring topic in the history of mankind to bring up on a Bitcoin podcast. That's all.
Oh man, always so much fun with you guys coming in here. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and thought exercises and purposely saying things at times to really get people riled up, because, hey, listen, if we're not getting somebody riled up, then what the hell are we doing here? The idea is
I
to
was
get people
really
thinking,
riled
right?
up when somebody came and met with me in 2017 and said, "You're not going to be able to mine Bitcoin anymore." And I said, "To hell I won't. This is a sovereign network. This is blah." And you know what? He was right, because it wasn't economically viable. I could do it for charity if I wanted to, but that doesn't work for very long, you know?
Yeah. Hey guys, make sure you're following on Twitter here. You're following me, TX West Capital. Andrew, there is AP_Abacus, ABACUS. And Tillman is Texas OL61 on Twitter. You can follow them. I believe the Twitter handle for their company is Triarch Public, right?
Nailed it.
And then thearchpublic.com is their website. Check it out. They're launching something November 18th. I'm still working on them with the name on it. It is my birthday that day. I think it's only right. But this is hard negotiations, guys. So we'll see how this goes. Other than that, be sure to check out the link down here, the TexasWestCapital.com/97GC. We're flipping the whole idea. We've been, doing group coaching for a long time. It's been about $4,000 for a year. Completely flipping around, giving it access to as many people as possible. Get on that wait list there, guys, and we can launch that. And it's going to be a lower price, much lower price, a monthly thing. And if you're there soon enough, if you get on the list quick enough, you can get it even lower than that price. So a lot going on. It just depends on how you guys want to approach markets and what you want to check out there. But definitely check out the guys here. Follow them. Give them a hard time online. Make their efforts online worth it. All right? All right, guys. Hey, listen, always so great. Hey, and by the way, be sure to check out Scott Melker's show from yesterday morning, The Wolf of Wall Streets. You'll see Andrew on there with Jeff Park, head of Alpha Strategies at Bitwise, going in greater detail about options with Bitcoin and what's going on with all that. And I just think if you're not very well versed in options or understanding how they play with the underlying asset, I think it'll be a lot of great information for you. I was able to see it afterward and just was like blown away by how great they discussed it. So definitely check that out. As always, remember, the only thing you control is how much you lose. And that's in life too, guys, not just in trading, all right? Glad y'all loved the episode. Everybody, have a great day. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Take some time off. Sometimes I wonder if Tillman really works. I don't know. That few episodes ago there, he was in his little car outside and just enjoying life. The rest of us are fucking offices.
I'm telling you how I work. This show last hour has literally been about that. So yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, listen. Join us next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, and we will be rocking your brains a bit more, whether you like it or not. Hopefully, guys, just to get you to think and to get you to research a bit more. You don't have to agree with us, but we just want you to think, because we do believe that Bitcoin's that big and important thing happening right now that if you know anything about it, you should definitely do as much research as possible.
I just posted a really important tweet on current Bitcoin price action. It's very, very important. It's going to be very influential. And I just look at it and I say, not hot dog. So that's the thought for today. Not hot dog.
So that's how you're trying to get people to go from here to follow you on Twitter, huh?
Yeah,
go to AP_Abacus and check out the tweet.
I'm following you because of that comment.
All right, thank you all for joining in. We loved having this discussion here, guys. I'll see y'all next week. All right, take care, everybody.